And I do think it brings a calmness to the home. I do think it brings a sense of security and also a bit of autonomy. Like, encouraged my 3-year-old, who has a really hard time of sitting still, to just sit there and to just be mind-blowing to me that their children seem so easygoing. We have this innate desire to create this safe, warm, soft place for our children. Welcome to the Slowish Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Alexis. I'm a mama to 2 little girls and a parenting coach. It's become my mission to help families rekindle connection, to rebuild relationships on a foundation of safety and trust, and to give parents the tools they need to show up with empathy and compassion, no matter what situation may arise. If you are craving slowness, peace, and joy in your parenting, you've come to the right place. Alrighty, let's get into today's episode. Alrighty, on today's episode, we are talking about something that you're like, how does this even go with parenting? We are talking about Hygge. If you don't know what Hygge is, it's okay. I'm going to explain it. And I'm also going to share kind of my story with Hygge, how I got into it and how I just recently rediscovered it. But I feel like this is the missing link for helping us to be more intentional, being able to create a safe space for our children. And I think that that's what's most important. And, especially when we talk about homemaking, like, this is the key. And I wish more parents knew about it. So that's why I decided to do this podcast episode on Hygge. So if you don't know what Hygge is, I'm going to read you the official definition that I found. And Hygge is a Danish word for a quality of coziness, feeling warm, comfortable, and safe. And I think why I clung onto Hygge for parenting is because it creates the safety that our children need. And honestly, after reading the Danish Way of Parenting book, which is an awesome book, by the way, I still love that, and I think it's one of my favorites. But I was intrigued by, how do the Danish people do it? Like, how are they the happiest people on earth? I'm pretty sure it's on earth. Yeah. And it was mind-blowing to me that their children seem so easygoing and they didn't have all these extra, stresses and worries that it seems like our children do here in the US. And so I was very intrigued by how the Danish did what they did. And back when I first discovered it, it was kind of on the rise. People had just kind of started coming on to this idea of Hygge. I believe it was right before everything happened in 2020. And I really wanted to create this safe haven, really, for my family. And I remember when I had first found it, was right before I had my first. And I just love this idea of bringing people together and connecting and just living this simple and intentional life. And Hygge just seemed to fit like perfectly in the midst of all that. And then we moved into a 5th wheel, and Hygge felt really hard. It shouldn't have felt hard, but it felt like I needed a home and I needed all these tools and these things to be able to host people. And I felt like that's what Hygge really was. And then just recently, about a month ago, my daughter and I were in the library, and I decided that I wanted to get off of my phone so much. And I wanted to get a book that I could read, like, that wasn't a chapter book, that I could just set on the table and read it in between, doing little things. So I wasn't just scrolling on my phone. And that is when I hopped on to finding this book here, the My Hygge Home book. And it's from the library, so I'm covering where it's from. But anyhow, I loved this idea of bringing Hygge into our home and kind of revisiting so many of those things that I enjoyed. But I know what you're thinking. You're like, okay, what does this have to do with parenting? And as I went through this book, I felt like especially as mothers, we have this innate desire to create this safe, warm, soft place for our children. And Hygge seemed like the way to do it. It seemed like an easy blueprint to follow. And what I loved about this book, here, I'll kind of show you some of the pages, is it gives like just little things, little tiny tidbits that you can add into your home. And it's not like you have to do it all at once, but it fosters this environment of safety, which is, I would almost say, detrimental to our children's development. And it's going to encourage our children to be able to really expand and allow their whole body just to grow, their brain to feel just this safety. And that's the goal, right? That's the goal for us as parents, is to give them this safe space to learn how to be an adult, how to be a human being. And what better way to do that than to start in the home? And for myself, I found that as I began to really think about creating this cozy, safe space for my home, it's kind of like my body started to follow. And the more intentional I was able to be with my kids, I was finding more time for rest. I was finding more time just to be with my kids and not feeling this overwhelmed, burned out, exhausted feeling. And it was really simple. So I feel like if we can begin to integrate these little changes into our home, we will be able to have a better connection with our children. I think that when we let go of all the clutter, which if you just listen to one of my most recent podcast episodes on minimalism, it's like we are just cluttering our lives with stuff. We're cluttering not only our lives, but our minds. Our minds can only handle so much. And so when we can do things like change up the lighting, change up how our couch is positioned, all to create safety, I think that that's going to be huge for our families. I think we're going to spend better time together. We're going to enjoy our time together because the priority is being connected with our children and our families and our spouses and our friends and our family. I mean, really, Hygge is about friends and family. But yeah, I think that it's a beautiful way to integrate that environment piece for parents. So when we are able to start implementing, and these are just 5 things that I found were like the easiest to change and the most impactful, I feel like our children are going to start to let go and let loose. And don't fear if you're like, what is going on? Their emotions are all over the place. They're finding safety. And so kind of know that as you are finding safety within yourself and in your body, it's normal for there to be a bit of all over the place feeling, because your body is finally letting loose of all those stored feelings, traumas, all of that. So let's get into the 5 ways you can start implementing Hygge with your family. And I want you to know I've done all of these things. And it's not like I do them all the time, but they have made a huge difference in our family and our children and how we're able to be together and enjoy that time. So the very first thing that I started doing, I actually heard this from Margaret. I forget her last name. I think it's Metheny. Sorry if I said it wrong, Margaret. But I love her channel. She talks a lot about minimalism, and something that she had mentioned was lighting a candle at dinner and how it changed the mood. It changed everything. And then when I reread this Hygge book, My Hygge Home, I was really surprised that lighting had so much to do with Hygge. And I mean, it can just be the littlest shift of going from having like the LED lights to just warm bulb lights. And so we actually began changing our lighting in our home, which I'll share more about this in a little bit. But before I even really got into Hygge again, I did start lighting a candle at dinner. And you want to know the coolest part about this? My girls, well, my oldest at the time was the only one that was verbal, but she was like, are we lighting the candle? Is it time to light the candle? Is it dinner time? Can you light the candle? You know, like she was waiting for it. She was ready for it. And it really encouraged everybody to sit down. And so it almost felt like a romantic evening every single night. And so we would turn off all the lights and we would just sit around the dinner table and we'd have conversation. And it actually fostered conversation. It encouraged my 3-year-old, who has a really hard time of sitting still, to just sit there and to just be and to, maybe not even eat her dinner, but just to be there as a family. And so if you have a child that really struggles with that, make that dinner time really intentional. Light a candle. Dim the lights. If you don't feel comfortable with the candle, you can always do, one of the ones that, flicker, but something that lowers the light. And in doing this before bed, by the way, super great for their sleep, super helpful to get them into that calm state, allowing their body to kind of calm down. So this has more benefits than just being Hygge. All right. Number 2 is create a cozy corner. So as many of you know, I have my safe space posters. If you want those, you can comment below and I will send them to you. But there's also a link in the description. But in this cozy corner, this is a space where our child can feel 100% safe to have whatever feeling and emotion they need to have. And I encourage you to take those safe space posters and to put them in there so that way they can identify what they're feeling, what they're needing. And this, I want you to really think about this from their level. Like, I don't want you to create this cozy corner for you. And that's kind of the hard part I was having with so much of the Hygge stuff, is that like, I really wanted a beautiful aesthetic because for me, that makes me feel Hygge. But for my kids, it's much less about the aesthetic of things, although that's super nice. It was more about what did it feel like on their level. And so I actually like got on the ground where my daughter wanted her cozy corner. And I really tried to see things from her perspective. And what you will notice when you get on their level is things look a lot different. And you're going to start looking around and being like, oh, I never noticed that. Or, oh, that's surprising, from their level, things look much different. And so I encourage you to let your child create this cozy corner. Give them the tools, you can even give them ideas, but let them make it their own. And this is their space to feel and do whatever they need to do. If they're feeling like yelling, their cozy corner, that can be a space where they can go and safely do that. For my daughter, there's a lot of times where she feels like hitting and kicking and all of that. And so we have actually made our bedroom the designated calm down space. And my room is off limits all other times of the day, except for if you need to calm down. This way it is completely clean. It feels fresh. It feels good. The bed's always made. And she's actually been jumping on the bed to calm herself down. And she just says, Mom, your room feels so calm. And I think that is huge. I think that's huge in helping her to release those emotions. Imagine if my room was really cluttered and it had, laundry all over and it did not feel light and it didn't feel calming. I mean, she wouldn't be able to release those emotions to their fullest potential. And so, I love this idea of creating a cozy corner, cozy spaces, really thinking about making things cozy. The other thing I really loved here was creating a cozy corner in a literal corner. And so there was something that was mentioned in the book. I should have highlighted it. But anyway, basically, there is complete safety when your back is backed into a wall. You feel safe to be and to explore and to just let your guard down, right? And so I think that when we create this cozy corner, let's ensure that it's not in the middle of the room in a teepee, okay? Just because it's in the teepee in the middle of the room doesn't make it safe. So we really want to use walls and things like that to make safety. Something that they mention in the book that I absolutely agree with and I never thought about before, but where you position your couch can feel very vulnerable. And so maybe making a furniture change, maybe just, flipping things around, changing where things are, can actually really affect how a child feels about something. And so I loved that they recommended putting a chair or your couch up against a wall because that feels like ultimate safety. And some people even go as far as like putting their bed against the wall. And that's why a lot of kids' beds are against the wall so they feel safe. And we actually started doing that after I read this. And I mean, it's a game changer. It's huge. They feel so much safer. And so, thinking about how can I make my home with what I have more comfortable, more cozy. It's not that hard. It's just actually having to make a change and to change the way you think about things. So now I know what you're going to do today. You're going to be looking around your home and be like, how can I change things to make it look more cozy? And once you really start to think about it, I mean, it's going to change how your family interacts, the amount of connection that you're able to have, because are they able to feel completely safe and vulnerable? I love this idea of creating this safe haven. And so let's make our homes this beautiful safe haven without having to spend any extra money, right? Isn't that the goal these days? The next thing that I would encourage you to do is to change your lighting. So we had touched on this earlier, but we went from having our home was completely LED lights. That's what was in our rental. And I was like to my husband, it's giving me headaches. I can't stand it. And so we bought all new light bulbs, which by the way was not cheap, but it changed everybody's mood. Nobody felt grumpy. Nobody felt angry. It was like, peace. So look for warm light bulbs, and you can find those in an LED version. So that way they are still energy efficient and all that good stuff. But really think about your lighting. Another thing we did is we added a lamp to our living room so that we could just have that on in the evening. Everybody could kind of start to calm down. Having that overhead lighting, even if it is a warm light, can sometimes feel overpowering. It can feel like, whoa, there's so much coming at me, and we want to really calm the body down. We want to really relax and settle in. And so, that was a really easy switch. And you guys can even thrift store, lamps and stuff like that. That's where I found mine. And I love that. I love that we can just make subtle shifts and changes in our home just so we can allow for our children to feel vulnerable. Like I said, to feel safe, and it doesn't take much effort on our part, right? Just these little shifts and changes. The next thing is to utilize natural light. So I think everybody is really drawn to natural light. I love in the book how they talk about how windows are just, it's a thing in Denmark. And here in the US, the amount of windows, I mean, it's important, but like having windows with a view is a big thing in Denmark. And so I started opening up all my windows. And if it's a nice day, I mean, I'm opening up, like letting fresh air in. But like, let's let more natural light in. Let's let God's beauty just pour into our homes. That's how I like to think about it. And I mean, not only that, but then it saves in your energy bill, right? But throughout the day, it's like, let's let this natural light in and let's let it heal our soul. Let's let it, calm us down. I don't know if you've tried this, but going to a window when a baby is really cranky and having a really hard time is a great way to calm them down. I mean, it even calms us down. I've shared this story in the past, but when my daughter was diagnosed with her heart defect, which I have a whole podcast episode on that. But when she was diagnosed, the one thing I did to ground myself was every night I went and looked at the sunset out of our back window. And it was the only time of day that I knew she would stop crying. And I don't think it was just because it was random. I think that it was literally the sun just healing the two of us, healing everything that we had gone through. And so I encourage you to go to a window. If you need to feel calm, if you're like, oh, I don't know how to, get my body to calm down. I'm feeling really frustrated. I'm feeling really angry. Go to a window. It is so incredibly helpful. And start your day by opening up all the windows. And if it's nice enough out, literally open the windows and let that fresh air in because it'll change everybody's mood. Okay. The next thing is look at your space from your child's perspective. I touched on this earlier with the cozy corner, like really get down on their level, see how they're perceiving things. But when you have little kids, let's look at life from their perspective. And I think they talked about in one of the books or in one of the chapters about how, they wanted to get on a child's level and see how they explored the world. And so they created, I believe it was a city, I could be wrong, but with this perspective in mind. And it's like, yeah, that is so true. Like, is my home pleasing to my eye and my eye only, or is it pleasing to my child's eye and to my husband's eye? I mean, my husband is 6'3" and I'm 5'4", and then you've got, my girls are teeny tiny. They're like 5th percentile. So like we have a whole bunch of ranges here that we have to consider and to think about. And I've only been thinking about mine. And so I've been really inviting in this idea of looking at spaces from their perspective. And I do think it brings a calmness to the home. I do think it brings a sense of security and also a bit of autonomy. Like the kids are more able to do things on their own because they can, because I've thought about, what is this like from their perspective? So yeah, there's just little shifts in there that you can make to help your child, feel like they belong, to make them feel safe, to make them feel at home. That's really the goal here. The last thing that I started doing on a daily basis, this was actually with my first, I just started playing instrumental songs. I actually was listening to instrumental hymns, and it was just a very light background music. I know a lot of people really like classical music. I also love the Native American flutes. I think those are beautiful. But finding just some background music that doesn't have words to it, that isn't overstimulating for you or for your child, but just putting this on in the back to set the mood of just peace and calm, and it really will change how everybody is feeling. It's amazing to me. And I know that music is really powerful, but it's amazing to me, the power of music. And something that we started doing recently is the girls would get into a bath and I would turn down the lights. We would make I would do like a magnesium bath. I love magnesium baths. And then I'd put on I have these candles that are switches, and I let the kids turn them on so that way, they can feel like they're involved, and put them where they want in the tub or near the tub, and they just soak it up. And you want to know what? They sleep better because there's not this bright light, blaring at them while they're in the tub. And yes, there are nights where they absolutely love to splash around in the tub and, be crazy and jump off the wall and do all the things toddlers do, right? But there are times where just setting this intention and then just sitting there, just observing, just watching. And I think Hygge has so much about just being present and being able to be in that moment without needing to be anywhere else, because you feel like you can completely let your guard down. You can completely let loose and just be. And I think that's a beautiful thing of Hygge. So I hope that you found some tip here that encourages you to start building this safe haven, because I do believe that our environment does shape how we feel and how safe we feel, how we're able to connect, and really carve out just little moments to be able to experience this Hygge with your children. And for me, one last story. I love reading with my girls. And so we actually cozy up in Emmy's cozy corner, and we all read books together, and we get blankets, and it's so cozy and it feels so good. And we don't do this for hours. We do it for sometimes 5 minutes, because my youngest, she's almost 2. She's all over the place. And so I think that it's important that we just remember that we don't have to make a whole day Hygge. We don't have to make a whole evening. We can just carve out these little tiny moments, make these little tiny shifts to create a safe space for our families to grow and become the little people that God has made them to be. So anyway, thank you guys so much for being here. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to subscribe, follow the podcast, give it a thumbs up if you love this. And I'm curious, what is the one thing you want to start implementing in your home? What Hygge-ish thing brought your heart lightness and joy that you would like to start implementing with your family? So anyway, alrighty guys, I hope you have such a good week and happy parenting.